Hello and welcome back to All Things Money. I'm your host, David Blain. Today we're devoting the show to inflation. What is it? How is it computed? What's it mean for you as an investor and a consumer? If you missed the first couple segments, head on over to our website, www.dlblain.com, and we'll post archived copies of the show there after a week or so, and you can catch up. When I finished last week, I was talking about the incredible rise in college tuition. I just thought I'd throw this out here. According to the College Board, the public four-year average charge for in-state is $8,244 for tuition and fees. That's not room and board. That's just tuition and fees. For an out-of-state student, it's $12,526. The four-year private colleges on average charge $28,500 per year in tuition and fees. And, we'll talk a little bit about this, that, all you hear about is, big oil's gouging the consumer and, big pharma, the drug companies are gouging the consumer. I tell you where the real crime is taking place, and it's in the college costs. There's absolutely no control over college costs, and the more that the money is just given away and the floodgates open, the faster it's going to continue to rise. Most people that go to college get loans that, frankly, they never intend to pay back, or they get grants or something like that. And so once again, the cost is just like healthcare. Whenever you disconnect the person receiving the service and from the cost, the price is going to go up. It's just a simple fact of the matter. And we see that in college. As less and less people are actually writing a check for their college or working their way through school, you're going to see the costs continue to spiral. That's just the way it is. Okay, so let's look at, since we're on that, let's talk a little bit about what's been happening in the inflation world. We see that last month, the data came out, and the headline CPI came in at 2.87%. That's the full CPI. The core CPI came in at 2.18%. That's excluding food and energy. Which, by the way, energy was up about 6.97 year over year. So those are annualized numbers. Let's talk a little bit about the components of that. Going back a few months, if we look at food and beverage, has been averaging somewhere around the 4% range. Housing costs somewhere around the 2%. Apparel inflation has been around 4%. Transportation back last fall was in the 9% range. Has come down a little bit to the 5% range. But remember that we have been on an upswing the past couple of months. Medical care has been pretty steady in the 3% range. Recreation, negligible inflation, but energy has been the big one. If we go back to October, the year-over-year rate of change in October was 14.2% energy inflation. We saw a headline inflation of 3.53 back in October, once again down to 2.87, and the core CPI, which was 2.1 in October, is 2.18. So we see the core CPI staying just above that target 2%. We see the headline CPI coming down, thankfully, from that 3.5 range last fall to about 2.87%. Once again, we think the 2% is kind of the maximum that the Fed would like to see. So as long as the inflation rate is above that level, I don't think we're going to see much rise in interest rates at all. Now, I wanted to talk about since 2000. Let's go back about 12 years. This is where I was talking about education and people talking about energy. The past 12 years since 2000, energy has gone up 115.7%, which, remember, is not a component of CPI necessarily. The CPI itself has gone up 34.9%, about 35% total since 2000. So inflation, 35%. The core CPI, once again, excluding food and energy, is up about 27%. College tuition and fees, up 111.8% since 2000. You can do the math. Even I can do that math. But 111% divided by 12 years is great. Is around 10, roughly around 10% a year. That's way too high for college. It's up there around energy. Once again, you hear the vilification of energy, but college is just it's ridiculous. The 8 core components of CPI, we see medical care up 60.7%, transportation and other goods up in the 40% range, food and beverage and housing in the 30s, so they're tracking along with the average. Things that have brought the average down, apparel actually had deflation, minus 2.8%. And a lot of that probably has to do with, having the goods made in Vietnam or Pakistan or wherever the things were made. But apparel actually declined almost 3% over the past 12 years. Recreation only went up 11.8%. So that gives you an idea. The big culprits: energy, college tuition and fees, and then of the core components, or the 8 components, we see medical care leading the way at 60%. So just kind of give you an overview of where, when you hear inflation went up, 3%, what does that mean? And once again, I encourage you to look at these subcomponents to get a better idea of how it's going to affect you. This is what we do when planning for people, is we look at them and say, okay, well, you're a young family planning for college. We may want to weight the inflation rate a little bit higher because you've got this massive college expenditure coming up. Or if you're a traveling salesman or something, we want to weight it. Longer term, we look at some of the statistics going back to the 1800s. We see inflation, 1872 to the present, about 2.87%. So we're right on track with that. Since the World War II, it's been 3.95%. And any that were around in the 70s and early 80s and recall the high inflation, you will have noticed that even though college and energy is up, the whole inflation rate is down almost a full percentage point over the average since World War II. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's show. Once again, we wanted to take a look at inflation. We looked at what it is, how it affects you as the consumer and investor, and we just encourage you to dig into the numbers a little bit for your own education. So for All Things Money, I'm your host, David Blain. I hope you will join us again next week at the same time on these same channels.
The proceeding was a paid program. The opinions expressed are not necessarily those of WNBU and Inner Banks Media.